Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honorable but very difficult task of keeping you alive and myself after this modest lunch. So I try to cut my text. And that was the most part of it, so it's all easier for me. Okay, so for better or worse, the 1440s and 1450s were a key period in Hungarian-Serbia relations in the Middle Ages. Starting with the candidacy of the son of despot George Brankovic to the Hungarian throne in 1440, about which Sasha has already spoken, through the great anti-Ottoman campaigns of John Hunyadi to the heroic defense of Belgrade in 1456. For 16 years, the destinies of Serbia and Hungary had been intertwined to an extent that was rarely attained either before or after. Due mostly to the complicated political circumstances, but also to the controversial personalities of the chief protagonist, John Hunyadi on the one hand and George Brankovic on the other one, this period of cooperation was not free of contradictions and occasionally violent conflicts, yet it was nevertheless a time when the mutual interests of the two neighboring countries came closest to alignment, and when, despite political and especially religious differences, the common aim of halting the Ottoman expansion repeatedly pushed these to the background and fed a cooperation that in a sense stands without parallels in the history of the two countries. After the accession of the great Hunyadi's son, Matthias, it seemed at first as if events would follow the same course as had been the case up to 1456. Uncrowned and threatened in his very political existence, one of the first great political ventures of the new King of Hungary was the effort to rescue the remaining part of Serbia with the help of the King of Bosnia from Ottoman occupation. Yet the failure of the attempt and the consequent inability or unwillingness, we don't know, of the Hungarian government to relieve Smederevo was already a harbinger of new times and new dangers. It was not for the first time that Smederevo fell to the Ottomans, as is well known. In 1439, a great Hungarian army was camping along the Serbian marches while the Ottomans besieged the castle, but did nothing to help the defenders. Then, however, King Albert of Hungary promised by solemn engagement that he would shortly resume the war against the Ottomans, although his untimely death within weeks thereafter spared him the necessity of putting his words to the test of deeds. In 1459, however, King Matthias made no promise at all, and after the failure of his Bosnian solution, left instead Serbia to her fate. In this, he even collided with his own uncle, Mihai Szilágyi, to whom he could thank his very accession to the Hungarian throne, a clear indication that for him, all-out war against the Ottomans, which had been the lifetime program of his father, was no more a priority. The medieval Serbia state perished, but Serbia under Ottoman occupation remained a key factor for the medieval Kingdom of Hungary until the fall of Belgrade in 1521. That it was so was of course due to the strategic location of Serbia in the northern Balkans. The Serbian border was like the soft belly of the Hungarian kingdom, but there were no mountains to offer a kind of natural protection, as was the case with Croatia and Slavonia to a lesser degree, and especially Transylvania. Already the great castle building activity of King Sigismund was concentrated to the section of the lower Danube along the Serbian border, and it is certainly no mere coincidence that the key military events in the Ottoman-Hungarian conflict in the middle of the 15th century were all closely linked to this region. The siege of Golubac, the two sieges of Belgrade and Smederevo, as well as the great military campaigns of Hunyadi, which were all started from this region, whatever their ultimate goal was. While, after the disengagement of King Matthias from the Ottoman War, no more major ventures were launched through Serbian territory, the area played a key role in the transformation of the Hungarian military by the early 16th century. The special characteristics of warfare there are clearly reflected by the composition of the permanent armed forces that defended the kingdom in the marches facing Serbia. The predominance of light cavalry forces, hussars, and armed boatmen there seems to have been an individual feature within the Hungarian military organization. In its emergence, surely an important role was played by the refugee Serbian lords like the Jászai, for instance, who were received by King Matthias and endowed with landed estates in Hungary, and whose fighting methods were gradually adopted by the neighboring Hungarian lords as well. An equally important role was probably played by the Serbian peasants who were relocated in the thousands by the Hungarian raids that were conducted against Ottoman Serbia. The disengagement of King Matthias from the Ottoman War, and thus from the policies of his own father, has traditionally been judged with a great deal of understanding by the Hungarian historians, who tried to account for the conspicuous inactivity of the king on the Ottoman front by deciphering a grand strategy in the background, in which the ultimate goal of the king would have remained the war against the Ottomans, the Western wars being no more than means to achieve the very goal with greater power and efficiency. Whatever the case, and whatever the king's long-term plans, however, it is beyond doubt that in the 1460s and 1470s can be regarded as the last period of missed opportunities. In the First Ottoman-Venetian War, 1463-1479, while formerly allied with the Republic of Venice, King Matthias did nothing to exploit the commitment of the Ottomans to the southern Balkans. With regard to Serbia, the sole result of the war was the launching of brief forays into Serbian territory, one already before the solemn ratification of the Hungarian-Venetian Treaty in 1463, and led personally by the king, and another 3 years later, organized upon the king's order by Branković and the captain of Belgrade. While the aim of the former may have been the taking of the castle of Zrnov, Avala, by surprise, the campaign of 1466 already featured all the characteristics that were to be the hallmarks of all subsequent Hungarian military operations toward Ottoman Serbia. Indeed, these features were already evident in the raid on Kruševac in 1437, which foreshadowed the future course of warfare in this section on the Ottoman-Hungarian front. Swift, light cavalry raiding, backed by wagons and river forces, destructions of Ottoman supply facilities, but the absence of any major strategic goal. The pattern remained basically the same in the last decade of the 15th century and the beginning of the 16th. In November 1480, the raid led by the captain of the lower parts, Pálosfalvi, in the direction once again of Kruševac, was but a side operation to the Bosnian campaign led by King Matthias in person. The raid was repeated a year later, already after the death of Sultan Mehmed II, when some new fortifications were erected and others, held by the Ottomans, were destroyed. In all these raids, there were smaller clashes with the local Ottoman forces, especially around Smederevo, but visibly nothing was envisaged that would have changed the balance of power. The situation was very much the same in 1494, when that great figure of anti-Ottoman warfare, called Pálosfalvi, accompanied by the voivode of Transylvania, once again invaded the northern part of Ottoman Serbia. Although this raid was judged a missed opportunity already by the contemporaries, it has to be seen that by then, due basically to the policies of King Matthias, the Hungarian government had lost all drive to initiate any military operation that would upset the status quo on the Serbian front. That was to remain a fatal check on Hungarian policies until the Battle of Mohacs. There were 3 apparent exceptions to this general rule. One during the reign of King Matthias, 2 in the early 16th century. The first, the siege of Šabac, is one of the best known and most frequently explored episodes of Hungarian military history in the 15th century. For the siege of Šabac, Matthias mobilized perhaps the greatest army during his entire reign, even mercenary troops normally employed in his western wars. And if one believes the king's war propaganda, the taking of the castle was an outstanding result that radically changed the military situation in favor of Hungary. Yet it has been repeatedly emphasized that Šabac had no real strategic importance, and that the King of Hungary dared not to attack the castle that would inevitably have caused a major Ottoman counterattack, and then thus a new war, namely Smederevo. Seen from this point of view, not even the siege of Shabbat is really an exception to the general rule, while no doubt involving greater forces than even the offensive campaigns of Hunyadi, and consuming huge expenses, the siege, in its ultimate results, did not considerably differ from the Hungarian raids launched either before or after. It deliberately avoided causing a breach with the Ottomans that would have led to a great war. The wars that Hungary, once again allied with the Venetians, fought with the Ottomans in 1501 and 1502 were another missed opportunity. The situation was similar to that in 1463-64. With the Ottomans occupied in the southern Balkans, the Hungarians had the opportunity to strike a blow from the north and thus to achieve a breakthrough that would undermine Ottoman influence in the Balkans. The outcome, however, was completely different. While the Hungarian war efforts in the early 1460s at least led to the occupation of part of Bosnia, and before all, the key castle of Jajce, the two campaigns that were led to Serbia in the late autumn of 1501 by Jovan Šomi and early in the next year by Duke Lörings Ujlaki and Jovan Branković, featured all the characteristics of raiding enumerated above. Looting and burning and minor skirmishes with local Ottoman leaders, but nothing that would cause a durable change in the already familiar pattern of Ottoman-Hungarian warfare. That, apparently, the Sultan himself, Bayezid II, was partner to his fake war, may have made the Hungarian politicians honestly to believe that they had nothing to win by a more aggressive approach. The last Hungarian intervention in Serbia before the fall of Belgrade in 1521 was a clear indication of how self-destructive this policy of non-aggression was to be from a Hungarian perspective. The short siege of Zsinov, which ended with a panic-driven flight of the Hungarians, led by Voivod János Szakai, the future king of Hungary, was the clearest indication of the new power relations between Hungary and the Ottomans. From a buffer state, quotation marks, of controversial status, Serbia had been turned into an area of constant concern for the Hungarians, a source of problems to which no solution could be found within the framework of strategic thinking which had been shared by all Hungarian kings and lords since the fall of Smederevo in 1459. Indeed, to conclude, from this perspective, it is interesting to cite the role of the Brankovici as mediators of peace between Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. Three such cases may be mentioned here, and I think that it will be spoken more about this later on. First, the peace of 1444, mediated by Despot George, that of 1483, mediated by Branković, and that of 1503, mediated by Jovan Branković. While, as is well known, the peace of 1444 was preceded by the famous Long March and followed shortly by the Great Christian Campaign that ended with fatally at Varna, the peaces of 1483 and 1503 had been preceded by fake campaigns and followed by long periods of at least official peace. Thus, the intermediate role of the Serbian despots remained basically the same as before 1459. What had changed drastically was the relationship of the powers between which they mediated. Serbia remained of key importance to the Hungarian kingdom after 1459 as well, but after the missed opportunity of 1459, it had never managed to take the initiative there. The catastrophe of 1521 was a logical outcome of that development, at least in my opinion. Thank you very much for your attention.